Hello, everyone. Welcome back to part 2 of our webinar, which is called Develop and Implement Diversity Policy. This is the second part. We did assessment 1 and 2 in our first part of this webinar, and we continue with 3 and 4. And so, without much further ado, I'll take you to our PowerPoints, and then we can delve straight away into it. So here we are. Now, develop and implement diversity policy. This is the one that we are beginning to talk about. So what is this? What are today's papers? I want to try and link assessment 1 and 2 into 3 and 4, because the story continues, as you will have read in our assessment 1. The operations guys at the bank, the small community bank, and they have discovered through their survey that the employee staff that on the front line are not representative of the community that they serve, and this has to change. And therefore, as we went through creating a diversity policy, we thought it would be worthwhile for you to sort of really understand what is diversity policy, what are the benefits, who else is doing diversity policy, why has it come to the forefront of most companies in our society today. And so as we break down this assessment 3 and 4, we're just going to try and make this as quick and sharp and snap as we can, and just see it, direct you in our way you can find your answers, and direct you how you can mold your responses to link in with what is required. And so before I really get into 3 and 4, I thought it would be nice for me to go back and just recap on assessment 2. So we're going to do this and go back to assessment 2 so that you could be aware of what we are talking about. Right, so assessment 2, we are saying, this is just a recap of what you would have completed, or if you haven't completed, well, just hear this again, and just to reiterate some of the things that are very key. So in assessment 2, you are asked to complete this policy template. You have given a reason, the purpose for your policy, why you think it's important, and obviously the scope is, when you're covering, the scope will have included that all the employees of the company, from directors, general managers, and heads of department, all the employees are involved in implementing diversity policy. Most of the guys were right at the top that are the decision makers. Decision makers in the organization would initially have to drive the diversity policy. And then, of course, definitions of staff members refers both to employees full-time, part-time, and whatever. So I'm expecting that at this stage you have completed your policy template, you've given it a title, and you also had an opportunity to complete diversity policy action plan. Your goals probably would have been, say for instance, your goal, if it was to do with the leadership area or recruitment selection, you might say, well, we want to start with recruitment and selection. So what is the anticipated result? It would have been people seeking employment will be treated fairly and equally, and the organization will make all efforts to retain employees, based on their merit, based on the work that they do. And the actions that would have been taken there is to ensure that top-level support in this inclusion policy is sought, and that your directors and senior management have had a say and an input into your diversity policy, into the recruitment. So responsibility, obviously, probably generally you might say responsibility would lie with HR. In most cases, the Human Resources Department will take that initiative and run with it. Time frame, well, we'll say, look, we're putting this in place. How much time frame? 6 months, 1 year, depending on how big the organization is. And then you probably have to say, well, what are the resources we need? Maybe the resources we need will be a diversity training session for all the recruiting managers. And your second goal could be, in terms of working environment, creating a very diversified working environment. And so your anticipated result will be probably, if you wanted to deal in percentages, maybe you're dealing with men and women, you might say, well, anticipated result might be a 60-40 ratio. Rarely do you get a 50-50. If you do get that, hey, that's fantastic. And also, one of those objectives will be to ensure that the principles laid out in the policy are being followed. That was just a quick recap there on your assessment 2, so that we can segue into assessment 3. And so let's get into assessment 3, and let's really get on and see what is there that we have. Okay, in assessment 3, we discussed what today's purpose is, and now we're going to go into this, how the session will run and how you're going to get into this webinar, get the best. Well, I'll say at this point, you have your assessment 1 completed out there. You got your assessment 2 right in front of you, so that when you do assessment 3 and 4, you can see how these 4 assessments link. And then some of your responses that would have put in assessment 1, you might find that they might be needed for you just maybe to tweak them a little bit for assessment 3 and 4. So right on, let's look at what you're going to do now. We get started with the assessment 3. So there's a draft policy. Now, if we're going to go to our question, say, what is assessment 3 saying? What do they want us to do? So in your assessment 3, it says here, the assessment consists of 3 parts which must be completed, and the instructions to complete this assessment are included below. So let's just go straight away. And so your resources will be the implementation communication templates, the templates that we have, the PowerPoint, and let's look there and see what we require. So the scenario, the CEO and the board of directors have reviewed the draft policy and action plan you distributed and are happy with the format and content. So you were asked in assessment 1 and 2 to put together a draft policy for diversity, and now, you know, they're happy with your business case. They're happy with your business case, and now they've reviewed the draft policy that you put back, and now they've added you to say, well, CEO would like some additional information included in the policy action and detailing how the bank will engage with employees who have disability. So now, the board has also requested a goal be included for 25% of management positions to be held by women in the next 5 years. They have provided a deadline of 3 months to finalize and implement the diversity policy. There's some challenges there. After you finished your policy, you know, CEO said, yeah, that's great, it's beautiful. But however, I just need you to add some action plans of what will you do to engage with our employees if they have a disability, what do we have in place for that? And then also, can we include a goal of 25% recruitment management positions should be held by women in the next 5 years? There's a challenge. And so how do you add this into your existing draft policy? So let's go down to it there. So you're updating. You don't have to rewrite, you're just updating your policy. So obviously here on the 25%, that's a goal, right? That's a goal, one of those goals that you're gonna have to do, one of those objectives regarding also the disability. And now what are you required to do here? Use the implementation communication plan template, which is provided, to create an implementation plan, including communication strategy for the diversity policy. So your implementation must include, you got to identify 2 potential barriers to implementation recommend strategies, right? And then I have to identify and explain how the diversity policy will impact 3 other organizational policies. So how are these 2 other organizations going to be impacted by the policy? Outline a minimum of 10 implementation steps in chronological order. You may include steps already taken. Include a communication strategy to promote the policy in the organization. So we just wanted to go through those questions. But then as I begin to summarize and speak and explain how you might answer this, at least you can bear in mind when I speak, you should bear in mind these questions that you need to respond to. Because I won't go like, you know, question 1, answer 1. So just so all put it all in a context for the benefit of time. Yes, let's go to our PowerPoint and we'll pick it up the story from there. So this is a new share that we have on the PowerPoint, and here we go. So we have a draft policy that you've done, the action plan, and on the action plan now, this could be an example. Some of those policies, when you update the policy, you have 3 objectives. For instance, Fujitsu, when their policy, innovation, practice, that is customer social responsibility, and compliance. And with all these, so what do they need to do? So these are the attributes of the things that are going to form part of that policy and achieve those objectives. As you can see, there's to do with gender, there's to do with ethnicity, religion, domestic situation, so that you do not at any point discriminate against people with a different domestic living arrangement or corporate culture, LGBT, generational age, disabilities, and take into consideration that your boss says, what policies do we have to communicate or help those that join us with a disability? So now, for instance, in Fujitsu, they had to look at all these different attributes, say, well, what policy do we have for the gender? How are we going to deal with different ethnicities, religion? And do look and say, what are the attributes that will bring or diversity? What are the things that we consider to be part and parcel, the elements that create that diversity? Now, on the implementation, this is the template that you need for implementation and communication plan. So obviously, you're going to have to put you're the author, and what is the policy for? What that means, what you want to achieve, which already we have written that in assessment 2. We have the purpose of your policy, and whether the policy could be, well, the purpose is really to increase innovation, or maybe to increase understanding, or to increase our market share, or to educate our people. And these purposes, so, there could be different purposes that you would have chosen for your own policy. And when does the policy amendment come into effect? Just have to give a date there, date of commencement. What are the potential barriers to successful implementation? Include 2 issues. So when we talk about barriers to implementation, I think I've got a slide that I wanted to show you here to say the things that really affect people in terms of barriers. The different types of barriers we have, for instance, here, differing predispositions and cultures often result in different forms of expression. So what do we mean here? What do we mean by this? What we're saying is, when we come from different backgrounds and cultures, and we have obviously generally our different positions in certain areas, in approach, or maybe in resolving conflict, you might have a different approach. In keeping the peace, you might have a different approach. And so our predispositions obviously creates a different form of expression, or maybe how you express anger, or how you express some sort of curiosity. And those different positions become a barrier to us when we have to merge together, and become a barrier in us appreciating one another. Trust issues. A lot of people have trust issues either with a particular nationality, might have trust issues with maybe people with a certain experience. It could be CEOs, it could be HR, it could be finance, or maybe depending with your past experience and your background, there are cultures where it's very masculine at the top, and that creates a different understanding and a different approach to how people in that culture will perceive the way to deal with issues. And when diverse employees do most of the acclimating, now, what does acclimating mean? So what we are saying is, when these people that are diverse, people that are different from us, when they come to our organization, and they are the ones that are doing most of the acclimatization to our environment, or to our business culture and to our working theme. So they're the only ones that are acclimatizing. They're the only ones that are adjusting. They're the only ones that are sort of trying to adapt to the way we do business. But we that have been found here, we are not doing anything to meet them halfway in terms of adapting to the way they do things, or the way they understand, or maybe the way they reason out certain issues, or how they resolve conflicts. And this is where a lot of people differ, with a different approach to resolving conflicts, or maybe cutting a deal. Different cultures will cut a deal in different ways. So when these new people are the only ones that are acclimatizing to our environment, and we're the one that they are not doing anything, it becomes a gap. And so creates a bit of frictions, like, oh, well, I'm the only one who's changing and you're not. So that can become a barrier to diversity. Communication issues, different people from different backgrounds communicate differently. I can give you an example. Probably in other countries, your senior manager or the people that are above you that you report to, you either call them Mr. or Mrs. or Miss, whatever. And that's in different other cultures. But in another culture, your boss, your CEO, you're free to call them John, Pete, and so forth. And in other cultures, everybody's door has got a title of who they are and their ranking in the organization. And those people at the top associate with people at the top. That's the culture. And so those kind of things as well can affect the way people communicate. It creates a bit of fear. It creates a bit of blocking mechanism, puts people into boxes and sort of trays, as you will. And there's one, the glass ceiling. So having a glass ceiling where women are paid differently from men, and maybe some people are paid more money than the other, but you're all doing the same thing. You're all doing, you have all the same responsibilities. Just because somebody is a female or male and their salary is rated on their gender or rated on maybe, their color, their size, and what have you. So these are some of the barriers. There are many out there, but these are just a few that I could bring in. Or even some of the barriers to diversity is language. People that speak with a certain accent, that pronounce things differently from you. But imagine yourself, if you were in their country trying to speak their language, you would also speak with their accent, wouldn't you? All right, okay, let's go to our next slide. So I think we're ready to do assessment 4. And if there's anything that as we go along, you think it wasn't explained properly, you need to get back to it, please write it down and get back to me, and so that we can solve it. I'm just going to go back to our question as well, just to ensure that we're all on the same page. And so you got diversity policy there, and then we've looked at the potential barriers to implementations. And so you could outline implementation steps. What are the things that you are doing? And then we need to discuss this communication strategy. So on the communication strategy, what we are saying is, how do you communicate your message to your audience? So at different times of the business and of this implementation process, you're going to come across different audiences. So your first audience that you've had will be your senior management, because you needed approval from them. And then once the approval is done and you're not going into the implementation process, you might have to talk to middle management, then might have to talk to probably team leaders in that level. And so how are you going to communicate with that? And lastly, we'll have to communicate to all staff to say, well, this is the policy that we have, this is how we're going to implement it, and because you need their buy-in. They are the ones that are going to work with other diverse people that are coming into their workplace. They are the ones that also have to acclimatize, like you say here that we're there, acclimating. They also have to acclimate to the people that are coming in. That means their ways and things that they might have to change in order to show the acceptance of the new diverse employees that join them. So communication, you might want to have meetings, maybe with senior management, but you have some boardroom meetings, management meetings, these things might communicate, and then might also have to emphasize that by email and confirm what you said. And if you've got an intranet, like most companies, you would have an intranet, and the policy will have to be updated, put on the intranet, and then eventually once all the employees understand, might go on the internet. And you would also have to have diversity training programs for your managers, for them to understand exactly how the business benefit from this, and how they as individuals can benefit from this, and how also they can begin to exercise a different mode of managing people. Some of the diverse people will be managing could be remote, and therefore you need a different strategy, a different tactic. Now let's look at 4, and assessment 4, and let's start that. Let's go and see what assessment 4 is got for us. That's assessment 4. Here we go. So we're going to start with a monitor implementation template. So you have your policy, you have your draft. Now you're going to implement it. How are you going to monitor? This template helps you to put into perspective your activities, your actions, when you're going to do them, what resources you require. So in week 1, you might say, okay, week 1, I'm drafting the policy. After drafting it, maybe I'm reading it out to the heads of department and responsibility. Whose responsibility is that? If it's an HR department, maybe it's the head of HR who's doing it. Maybe if you have a director, what resources do you have? You might have the government legislation in front of you. Use that as a resource. There's also the diversity association that you might be wanting to get information from, and get input from different sources. And you might have also some specialists that could come in and train you. So the effort, how many hours that's going to be, when do you commence, what is the deadline? And I think from what we've seen here, you've been given something like 3 months for you to work on this. So whether you're writing the draft and you are explaining, or maybe you are rewriting, so you're going to tell us week 1, what are you doing? Week 2, what are you doing? Week 3, what sort of activities that you're going to get involved, what sort of resources they need, computers, packages, and things that help you write. And let's go back to our assignment. Let's have a quick look there to see where it is on. So on task 4, as we say, as we mentioned earlier, we looked at the implementation template. And now, as you have seen here, you would have read what the assessment is looking for, but for the purpose of rehashing, so that we are in this together, I'll just begin to read. The implementation of your diversity policy has been underway for the last 4 weeks. The template I showed you. So we're assuming now for 4 weeks you've been implementing this. You will need to monitor the implementation to ensure it meets the deadline provided by the board, and to address any contingencies as they arise. Information provided to that shows: 1. State manager in Victoria advises all employees have undertaken training for the new policy. So they've been training running. Queensland has completed half their employees with a target to complete the remaining over the next 2 weeks. They're moving at a good pace. New South Wales manager has yet to start the implementation instead. In your discussion with him, you've been advised he hasn't rostered enough staff to provide customer service while holding information sessions, and seems unwilling to do so due to salary costs. So what you're going to do with it? So you got your 4-week implementation plan, and you give that to the New South Wales manager. So you're going to outline 2 methods you will employ to monitor this plan to ensure it meets the deadline needed by the board of directors. So you might say to the New South Wales manager, I'm going to monitor you on a daily basis, right? So if he's running courses, we'll say, well, I want to know how many people you have in a session, and how long is that session running, and who's running that session. And so he could, because he does not have enough staff, he might have to stagger, maybe split some of his staff, maybe 2 man the desks, and the other 2 get into the training, or you might have to think of a plan to maybe call them during the weekend, or try and see after hours. But somehow, the deadline has to be met. And so part B, the board and CEO are interested in knowing how you're going to measure the impact of the policy once it's implemented. You're also going to create 2 to 3 page report for the board and CEO outlining how you'll measure work changes, how you're going to measure the work changes. So how you measure the work changes is simply through your recruitment procedure, through your recruitment policies. You have the HR to give you, say, well, how many males do we have? How many females do we have? Take statistics or maybe of the age groups, so that now you can have to say, well, you know, we got 300 employees, 20% of this age group, 30% come from this race, and, you know, I mean, males, females, maybe some close to retirement, and, you know, the list of those figures. So you're going to look at the movement to say, from when we started, have these figures changed? And through our recruiting process, are we doing enough to encourage people that were not represented to be included? You'll be using equal employment opportunity strategies. You might be also talking of the anti-discrimination acts as a way of encouraging those that always felt that they are not welcome. Behavioral changes of employees. Yeah, so behavioral patterns. You might want to check to see, well, what is their behavior now? So we are assuming in this instance, you had a workforce that was of the same similar background and upbringing. And now you are endeavoring to bring in people from different areas and, you know, so that you create a diversified workforce. And so what you have now introduced ladies into a department which they didn't have ladies. And what's the reaction of men? You know, what's the behavioral change? Simply, maybe when men were just working by themselves, they were free to talk whatever they like, and maybe even the dressing was more like, oh, well, I've just worked with men. Now that you have maybe 2 or 3 ladies that are working in the department, what changes could you see? Well, people might be coming with, you know, smelling nice perfume and nice shirts. You know, all of a sudden, the grooming changes, you know, and it gets a notch up. Some of those changes, and maybe people may stop swearing and speaking nicely to each other, because now that there are ladies in the office and everybody wants to be held in high esteem. So structural changes in the workforce, the hierarchy, customer client changes. So what you're saying is, now when you have maybe more women there in the department, your clientele, what do you see? Do we have now more of them coming in, and some of them much more happier, feeling much more welcome? Let's look at now part C. What do we need to do in part C? It is important to gather information from stakeholders to gain insight into their experience as the diversity policy has been implemented. So your suppliers would have been some of your stakeholders, your customers. You want to find out from them, you know, have we impacted them? What are the things that are bringing change? What are the areas that they feel have changed, or they're comfortable with or not comfortable with? How do they understand our diversity? And is there any way? So in doing this, you might do a survey, and I'll show you a sample of a survey here. So we go to a new share and we show a sample of a survey. There we have a survey for diversity. For instance, the first one, the leadership in this company encourages diversity. So I want people to take the strongly disagrees, somewhat disagree, the neutral, agree or don't agree. And management ensures that diversity is important through its actions. And you have, you know, ratings either 0 to 10, or they could simply state, I strongly disagree, or I strongly agree. Or it's like neutral, I'm really not sure what management thinks. This company is committed to diversity. Be asking, well, what do you think? And this survey, you can use it to your suppliers. You can use it even to your employees, so that employees can give you feedback in that, what are they seeing? Have we just implemented something that we're not practicing? Is it just one of those, you know, white elephants, as the word goes, where we build something, a big structure, but it has no value to anybody? So doing a survey gives you feedback on what your employees and everybody else is thinking, generally your stakeholders. The company respects individuals and values their differences, and you could be asking, is the company making progress in diversity initiatives? A fair workplace includes people from every race, and people could come in and say, no, it doesn't, no, it does, whichever way the situation may be. So that's a sample survey there, and you can search most of these. When you do your research, you can come across them, and if you can't find one, give us a call, and we'll give you something to look at, give you an example, sample to get your mind to start critically thinking. Let's go back to our template, and let's see what we got there. So we've got our new share, go to our template PowerPoint. What's this, that one? We have right, workforce changes, wherever changes, we spoke about that. But if you noticed anything, and then we're going to go to feedback, part C. Now, when you talk of feedback here, you are based on the survey that I gave you, where you have a feedback from your employee. They will tell you whether do they really feel things have changed? Do they really think that you're serious about diversity? Where do they stand in terms of what you're trying to do? Is this something that they're comfortable with? Do they feel well trained? So you could have 360 degrees feedback, where this is the feedback. You get an employee development and performance appraisals and training needs appraisal, post-training evaluation, organizational assessment, customer client satisfaction. So in a 360, you are contacting all the stakeholders, or you're getting in touch with everyone that you deal with. So, and in everything that you're involved. So your performance appraisals, your manager will be through that process of checking whether you're meeting your KPIs, you're keeping up with your responsibilities, you're meeting your goals, your milestones are being ticked off. That will give you a feedback, as well as knowing and understanding whether the part of the diversity that is included in the policy, how does it involve and impact your performance. Training needs appraisals, post-training evaluation. So it could be that diversity training that we need to tick off, diversity training that we need to find out to evaluate if the people really understood. So the process of feedback is you design feedback on the policy to be gathered from employees in each state, and the state manager on their experience during the implementation. So what does this mean? The state managers have to give us feedback about their experience during the implementation. When you implement these policies, some state managers say, well, look, this was really, really hard. I went out of my way. It's something that I'm not comfortable with. And it was painful for me to begin to delve into diversity. Or someone say, well, it was a great pleasure. I loved it and I enjoyed it. And I think this is one good thing our company has, we should take pride in. So that information that you gather from managers, from employees and so forth, you then analyze it to identify, say, well, what is it that we can change? And you use that information now to update the policy. What are the things that you think are critical and very necessary to that? So before we go recap, we'll probably just want to go back and check some of the questions to ensure that we've covered everything that we needed there. Whilst we're there, let's go back to our questions. So that's part D. Part D now, the CEO the bank has returned from a comprehensive workshop, gender equality in the workplace. Based on this workshop, CEO feels the diversity policy needs to be better and more clearly reflect the bank's commitment to fair and equitable pay for employees. What has he just found out? Maybe he just found out that, hey, ladies are being paid less than men. That is why now he's coming and say equal payment for employees. Recent statistics published by the Workforce Gender Equality Agency show that there's a gap of 35% between what males and females earn in the finance and banking sectors. The CEO would like our diversity policy to reflect the bank's goals to address this inequality in remuneration. There you go. You know, CEO has been to a meeting, to a conference. Now it's come back with new information. New research is showing there's a disparity. And so you're going to have to add that into your already existing policy. So that's your part D of what you need to do there. So we go back and let's see what needs to be done. We completed with this one. So let's go to the current slide that we need. I'm going to try a new share. Let's go. This is a sample of the survey and a sample of what we needed to do there. We've already completed that. Now let's go to assessment 4. Let's go to assessment 4. Assessment 4, new share, it's here, and it's here. That's still assessment 3. So to be clear on what you're doing in regarding to diversity policy, the important things here to look at is there's a theme starting from assessment 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the theme is in building the policy. So as you can see, you build it up in assessment 1 and 2. When you come to assessment 3 and 4, what you're doing now to the policies, you're tweaking it. There's some changes that are being asked to add, things like 25%, quota for women within the next five years. Another tweaking that you're going to do is there's a gap of 35% in salaries between men and women. So you're going to have to close that gap. And what are you going to do? And what are you going to change? That means in part of your policy, in part of those objectives, this is one of the things where I say our objective is to close the gap of 35% disparity in pay. And so how do you arrange that? How do you do that? And, you know, in the process, you might say, well, you know, recruiting and the salaries that we're going to offer, we're going to go back to human resources and begin to look and say, when we advertise these jobs, we should mention the salary, and irrespective of it's a male or a female who applies for the job, the remuneration package is the same as long as those responsibilities match the job. And so to wind up here and to recap on what we have said today in section 1 and 2, really it's just about understanding what is the key thing, understanding what is diversity, understanding its benefits, understanding that it's part of the legislation requirement as well, and understanding that it's very beneficial for the organization actually to be much more diversified and to look at the other examples in the world of successful companies and what they've done and how they've managed that. And if you are to be employed in any of these organizations, it will be, the onus will be on you to ensure that this diversity policy is carried into its future and its success is actually monitored. And you should have metrics. How do you monitor that? You do your surveys, you get information from HR of, you know, the number of people that you have at work, their gender, their age, and their background, from how many countries they come from. And when you include that and you begin to talk to your senior managers and get your people trained, that's the whole idea of this whole assessment. And the practicalities are in you putting your implementation program. What are you doing the first week? What are you doing the second week? What are your resources? Whose responsibility is it? What is the action plan? And as I've always encouraged you, you know, keep reading, keep researching, go to Harvard Business Review. Harvard Business Review is a very good resource for students to gather latest information on what successful companies are doing. And you might also want to look at some other business reviews, the Australian Business Review. Great information there. It's a great resource. You can go to Mind Tools, great resource for you to develop yourself and understand some of the models and theories that are involved in this. Hey, I wish you all the best. And we come to the end of this unit. I hope you do well. And like we always say, give us a call, give us a ring, feel free and let's help you get through this. Ciao. Wish you all the best. Bye-bye.